What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to go over more details on the Black Panther EA game, right? Obviously canceled, and we got Jason Schreier, not really coming to the rescue, but more like just telling us what this game could have been if it was not shut down, right? Doing a little behind-the-scenes story. You know, as it tends to be with these type of games, you know, kind of the end of the story was they were called into a meeting, and then 30 minutes later, they were told that everybody's fired and that the game is canceled. These things happen very quickly, and he talks about in the Bloomberg article that this was continuing EA's push of streamlining, right? And then what they basically did was look at all of these games that were taking too long, specifically taking too long in like the pre-production phase, right? If the game was being worked on for 3-4 years but nothing was really happening, that game was getting the axe. And that's what happened with this Black Panther game. That is a worrying thing that I'm not going to necessarily defend the game 100%, for the purpose of right now, because that's kind of what he describes for Black Panther. A lot of the staff, was hired just in the last year. So while the game was ramping up, and he tells the story in the Bloomberg article as well, the game was actually doing quite well. Like, they were happy with it, and it passed actually a milestone, a benchmark, if you will, with EA, where they actually said, okay, we're going to check this off, like you can move to the next phase. So like things were actually moving. It took a while. It took really until this last year where things were really coming together, and maybe the first couple of years it wasn't doing it so much. Now, one of the biggest things, okay, that we kind of knew is a lot of the people, or at least the base people that started this EA studio, right, this cliffhanger, some of them came from the Monolith team, okay? So you have that Nemesis System influence, okay? So for me, I need a game that can have the Nemesis System in it, or something like it. And that's what it sounds like this game had, is something you can't, obviously it's trademarked and all that jazz. Thank you, WB. You have to kind of do something a little bit different, but this idea that enemies and the game will remember you, in some way. To put it as simple as possible, that seemed to be a pretty big element, of this game. So I'm going to take this from the Spider-Man Brand New Day News and Countdown, friend of the channel. The plan, according to the people familiar with the game's development, was to feature various playable heroes from the comic book universe, and they're all competing for the mantle of Black Panther. The player would take control of one of these three, okay, and the other ones would become rivals with whom the player could cultivate relationships. The heroes would be allied against an opposing force of aliens, obviously the Skrulls, shapeshifters from the comic books and movies that were attempting to invade the African nation of Wakanda. Some of them could have been imposters posing as allies. Others might have remembered the player's behavior and acted accordingly, sort of like in Shadow of Mordor. So specifically, like those three playable characters, and you choose one and the other. I think we knew that a little while ago. That was kind of like the premise of this whole thing was based on. But you can kind of see how that Nemesis system starts to jump in, right? You pick one of the three. Now the other two, kind of becomes this interesting relationship with. And then you have the enemy of the game, maybe in like pivotal moments, maybe not, maybe in just random gameplay encounters, they can take the place. And, maybe some will remember, which, by the way, is a really interesting mechanic, because if they are the real people that you're competing with, they're going to remember you, right? They're going to know what you did. If they're imposters, they will not know that, right? So that is just and we're never going to see it. It's never going to see the light of day. But that is a really cool, like, that is the Nemesis system, right? But that's just that extra part where it's like, well, now, you think of the Middle Earth games, right? It's like, well, they know you because, like, they've ran into you before, or they've heard of you, whatever. But they have that kind of connective experience. Now you're playing around with something where it's like, well, some will remember you because of, story and lore reasons, and some won't. So, look, I know we didn't get the game, and the game was still probably very far out. This game probably would have taken, in all, 7-ish years to make, which is too long. There are definitely negatives you can say towards this game. We talked about the big controversy of one of the people in power, there, that they said something pretty darn stupid in the past, and, we've gone through all of that. But at the same time, like, I need a game that can do something like this. And it sucks to hear these good ideas. Like, these are, I think, factually, maybe biased, but they're good ideas. And he even floats the idea in the article that maybe the time of, like, these type of things are done. done. The thing is, I just feel like there's so much that goes into it, right? Because, he talked about where it was based, which was in Washington, and the very high prices, and EA is not doing remote work anymore. You have to go. So, they have to pay their people more, specifically at that studio. So now the prices are going up. And then it just took too long. Why was it taking 4 years? Now, yeah, I'm not here to put the blame, because honestly, it seems like we don't really know, why it did that. But, 4 years, that's not ideal. So there were, other things, but one of the potential reasons that he floats is, a game with these kind of experimental narrative systems, right? I think that's probably what you could call it. They're talking, they're things with story, but they're very they're just coded in a weird way, and they're hard to show off to people because they're kind of randomized. Maybe it's the end of that. Now, I would argue we never really got that in the first place, right? You could say it's the end of that era. When you got 2 games that did it with Middle-earth and that's it, I don't really think you could say, okay, well, that time is over, because it's like, well, you only did 2 games. But, I would like to see that implemented. An issue could just factually be, that it takes too long and it's too hard to implement, and these studios don't have 7-8 years to come up with something. They want things moving faster, especially when other things go wrong. We talked about that with EA, right? When you got FIFA dropping by just a couple million players, you take it out on everybody else. You don't have 4 years for them to figure this stuff out, even though it might take 4 years to get, because those are complex systems that are not done in a lot of games. So it's harder and it's longer, right? It sucks. It definitely sucks. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.